it's my company's 70th year anniversary, the 4th of July. So
That's awesome, man. Well done.
yeah,
Welcome to the 1% club. Weird, right?
yeah.
But it's about 1 or 2% that make it past the first 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
We almost didn't make it.
It's hard, isn't it? I mean, and particularly, I don't know about you, but I actually closed the company.
Mm.
7 years and $500,000 later, I stopped paying for it. And it was when you're, particularly for me, and I'm not sure about you, but when you're called, like it's so strong, it's like a sense of calling to be there. And to not be able to even live through that sense of calling, that sense of passion yourself, like you're busy training and guiding others to do it. So now you're not doing it yourself, whilst you're still now you're starting to feel like you're you're kind of faking it till you make it kind of deal.
Yeah.
Actually, it wasn't long after that I met Mike, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And we were at a conference together. That's where I met him. That was a conference I was an organizer of. And I even had one guy like come to me and said, it's like you're faking it till you make it. It's like he was being a bit rude about it. But when I stopped and thought about it, I thought, well, I don't subscribe to fake it till you make it. I don't think but I get the idea of it. So
Okay.
yeah, it's
Just
tough,
one
but to kind of come back from that, and we didn't
another
die.
myth. Another myth. Fake it till we make
And
it,
that,
right?
I think it might be on my list.
It's when that happened to us, it would have been easier to just close down and start working again.
Mm-hmm.
I did go back to work just to make sure that everything was working, but it's that feeling that aside from the responsibilities that I had and I wanted to take responsibility for some of the things,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it just felt like it's hard for you to imagine yourself doing something else, you know, and it just felt that this is where I like to be. And I went to work somewhere else. I met Ross. I met some of my other team
I remember
members,
that. Mm-hmm.
and
And you couldn't wait to get out of there.
yeah,
Nice people, but yeah.
yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna get out. I still have some people that were working with me during that time, and I met, and it just felt like, what I'm gonna do here is, it worked for me. It helped me get through COVID. But I'm getting the best people I know here.
Yeah.
Bring them back to my company, and we're gonna stride along, and work with that.
That's interesting, man, because, like, I mean, obviously very vividly remember that season for you, but I mean, I know also I had a cut down in clients, but not bad, but going back to, so my business challenges stemmed around the global financial crisis back in 07, 08, 09,
Mhm.
that sort of era. And, I had a company. It was a good business. It was reasonably profitable. Problem is it was very light on cash, highly leveraged. And even though the Australian economy did all right through the GFC, because of mining and so forth, so we didn't actually see much of a dip. If you're in the financial services sector, it was a struggle, but everywhere else was fine.
Mhm.
So ordinarily business kept going, except we had about 70% of our business tied up with government, and
Mhm.
government panicked and refused to spend. So they basically announced it might have been November 08, might have been 08. They announced that they were going to cease all spending, and they pulled all spending, every bit of spending. And they did not come back until about January, February 09. And we were just too highly leveraged. We just didn't cope. And so, bunch of things. I mean, there's all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. If I knew what I knew today, I could have easily rescued the business, and it would have been hard, but I could have done it. I could have turned things around and got it back on its feet, cut costs, all that sort of thing. But I didn't. We had a lot of it erroneously tied to our personal finances. And so we financially basically were wiped out. And so, but the same sort of thing, man. Like I stuck to a line. My solicitor, who was attorney who was helping me through that process. He said, if you declare bankruptcy, it's going to be the easiest option. It's going to be quicker. It'll be over in 3 years, all that sort of thing. I mean, it is over in 3 years, but it does carry with you for a lot longer than that in terms of
Mhm.
insurance, in terms of, jobs, in terms of all sorts of things.
Mhm.
They ask, have you ever been bankrupt? They don't say, oh, in the last 3 to 5 years. And so, and bankruptcy is different in Australia to what it is here in the US. But we made the call that we weren't going to do that. We're going to fight our way through it. We went back to, I had basically 4 large creditors. We went back to each of them and did deals with all of them. One of them, I mean, it was a miracle. One of them 100% forgave the debt, just in honor of the way we handled it and that sort of thing. Another one, probably about 60%. And then the rest we paid off over time. I mean, I'm so glad we went through that process. Like watching God move in that season was powerful. That was one of the most amazing things. But just also being honorable in our dealings. Like we wanted to pay these people back. I even got a letter. So one of them was the landlord um, of the property where the business was, and I basically kept working with him. I had a business partner. She disappeared, and
Mhm.
never heard from her again. And um, and so um, I dealt with the landlord. And so one of the things you can do in Australia is if you're a director of a company, you're now like, as a company closes, the company never goes bankrupt. It can be liquidated, sold off, forced into certain spaces, but it never goes bankrupt. It's the directors who become personally liable for any of the issues with the company. Like immediately, it just goes straight out to the directors. And then, of course, like all good creditors and bankers, they're lazy and they go after the people with the most assets. Yeah. So my business partner probably didn't have any, um, which was smart on her part. And so yeah, so it was an interesting journey. It was you know, we we had to we had to make it work. We did. I'd already moved from the city that the business was. There's a bunch of reasons why it collapsed, not just the GFC, and some of it was my fault. But we stayed honorable to the debts. We stayed in communication with the people we were trying to pay, and they were all or mostly very reasonable. Um, and then you know, it was actually really amazing because in that next 7 years, that was the preparation. 5 or 6 years, really, in the end, 7 years. It was that preparation for us then moving to America. We didn't have that plan back then, and we paid the last dollar off that debt a month before we got on the plane for America. So we came to America debt free. We came completely reset, looking for the next season, looking forward to the next season, and that's kind of what we stepped into 9.5 years ago. It's just amazing how it all works out.
Yeah,
Um,
every experience that we have sort of molds us and changes us. And
mm,
through the years, we've been able to clear a lot of the debt that we had as well.
yep.
And especially when we start clearing big debt, it's there's a there's a different feeling
Yeah, there really is.
stays with you.
Yeah.
You experience that
Stuff
feeling.
stuff under normal pressure you may hang on to for years, right?
Yeah,
If it's just like a mortgage or something, and then you realize, huh, we were able to pay more than that off in a year or two or whatever, like and yet we had it set for 15, you know.
yeah. I
So
remember looking. I remember when things went south for us, and then I looked at the total amount of debt that we had, and I was looking at it. There's just no way. I mean, there's just
yeah,
no way I can, without that client that left. There's just no way that
yeah,
I can pay this off. Like there wasn't not even the slightest idea as to how this is going to be resolved. And but I also had made that commitment with my wife. We're not running away. We are not changing. The funny thing is, we're not changing our names on Facebook. That was like that was the first thing. We're not gonna put our names and make it reversed or use a different language. With I'll allow myself to be searchable for
yeah,
people.
yeah,
There are some bad people that uh not bad people in the sense that gangsters or anything, but people that once money started becoming an issue, automatically turned off their Christianity, turned off their good friend or whatever, just turned it off and just became some very miserable people to deal with.
Don't
And
forget, I remember a lot of this.
yeah, and I was,
And we were
and I,
surprised as you were. Yeah.
yeah. So what we did is we paid off a lot of them. I think this is 20% of debt that we have, but this was our company was the experience that we had was we were very happy to be successful and things were just moving forward. And we had purchased we had two cars at the time that we had to let go, and that was very painful for us because one of the cars was where one of my kids was born in. So there's this
Oh
whole
gosh.
story about how the
Yeah.
kid was born, and we were 1 year. There was only 1 year left to pay, and we just did not have it to pay it. We could not, and so we let go of that car. What it's material stuff, but it's that memory that's never coming back. So we still have like the surgical scissor that they used to cut the umbilical cord on the front seat, and because the nurses were in such a rush, it fell and it was left in the car. So that's the only thing that we have now left from that experience.
Hmm.
And just last month, um, my wife had, I think 2 years later, my wife applied to buy a used car, and it was a miracle that we passed because we just had, we had on record that we had returned two cars, um, were repossessed. Two cars were repossessed. We could not
Oh,
pay,
okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's
and
tough.
there was no way that we could pass. But 3 years ago, my wife applied for a car, and I was just, okay, I'll be with you, but we're not going to pass. They are not going to keep us finance this car. My name is red as the red sea in terms of how my my credit looks like right now. There's just no way. And for whatever reason, she passed, flying
Yeah.
color. And uh, what happened was that last month we made our last payment on the car,
Nice.
and it's just like, oh, when I sent the payment, sent the proof of payment, and asked for the remove the encumbered in the registration. It's a different feeling. It's a different
Yeah.
feeling
It
because,
really
oh,
is.
but
Yeah.
but let me ask you this.
It's as nice as cutting up a credit card.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
When you were prior to that, did you have prior to having all of these problems? Could you attribute some of the reasons why we experienced some of these problems? Because while we were dealing, especially when we haven't dealt yet with extreme loss in business, was there this invincible feeling that you had? And it seems like everything was, and then you were just going and going and going. And then there were a lot of decisions that you had to have made. But because you've never experienced that kind of loss in business, you just went through and did not notice. Because that's what happened with me. Now that I look back is, oh, we got a contract. Oh, let's take two branches and they start two branches and, we put the seeds, invest in.
Oh, yeah. 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 So I call that if come, right? Even though you've got money coming in, if it comes in, this is what we're going to do, right? And so yeah, investing in stuff. We invested in stuff we shouldn't have. It was mainly internally, team members, offices, brand, office furniture, crap. Honestly, I don't have a better way to put it. Stuff that really, I mean, it was nice, but it didn't really add value
Mhm,
to our brand and to the business. When I look at it now, we could
mhm,
have stayed where we were. We could have had the same furniture. We could have just maybe had a nice boardroom somewhere that we met our clients at or whatever. But we didn't. We went that way. So invincibility is probably, I was actually, for me, it was actually, I had a deep fear of losing my business all the way
mhm,
through my business from '01 to '08 when it finally happened. I had a deep fear. I used to process it with people that I was accountable to. spiritual advisors, business leaders, and those sorts of things. And they'd give me advice on certain things. And of course, I didn't do anything about it. And some of it was, this is where I've really learned that the stuff that stifles us, if you talk about like primal fears, the two big ones in business, obviously fear of failure is the one that most people go to, but one that's more commonly misdiagnosed is fear of success. And fear of success kind of looks a little like fear of failure. Fear of failure is, I don't want to screw it up, so I'm not going to do anything, right? Fear of success is, if I'm really successful, there's certain things that I'm responsible for that I don't want responsibility for, right? And this fear of success is more what we see, like why famous artists and movie stars and that go off the rails, because they don't know how to handle their success. And, you know, it's why you have the lottery syndrome. When people make money out of the lottery, that 85% of them wish they never won. And they're in more debt when they're done than even they just had $1 million. And so it's that, and I think that's what I was suffering, fear of success. I watched all these people around me. I was very much involved in like a Christian kind of marketplace thing in Australia. I was a lobbyist for small businesses. So I was sitting in front of, you know, hundreds of thousands of small businesses across our country, working with two prime ministers, praying to God that they didn't ever look at my business. You know, I was the CEO of a small business organization alongside that. And so all those sorts of things. But for me, it was, you know, I was actually more fearful of being successful. And I think I still have some legacy of that, you know, like as I'm walking through, and in fact, even walking through a journey right now where I've been working on a mentoring program. I haven't been 100% happy with it. But then also, like, what's my motivation? What am I doing this for? Where's it going? What right do I have to even be there? And I don't want to end up with the term. It's interesting. I just did a video last week on imposter syndrome, right? And I actually hate the term imposter syndrome because I think it's kind of like obsessive compulsive or narcissism, those sorts of things. They're easy terms to throw around, but very few people are actually the extent of
That thing. Yep.
yeah. So imposter syndrome really for the majority of us looks like just a sense of, I feel unworthy or I feel like I don't belong, not like a real brutal, like it's real brutal and it's reality. So I'm not there. I do feel like I belong. I just feel like sometimes it's a struggle.
It's like
And
you're one step away from it. That sort of thing.
probably 5 or 6 steps, but yeah,
5%.
I think most people, well, I think most people are.
Yeah.
And so no, I feel, yeah. And so anyway, it was just, you know, that all those sorts of things. And so, and then the irony of all of that was my company back then was called Market Hope, which here in the US, it is again today. Hope means confident expectation of good. And here I am sitting with this mess and feeling like I had no confident expectation of good coming out of this business. You know, my tagline in Market Hope was confident expectation for you and your business, right? And I couldn't find it myself. 3 or 4 months it took me to really dig deep and to come back and go, okay, here's where, and so rather than just, oh yeah, I was just all gung ho, there was more fear at play. And so I had to recognize that. I had to then stop and go, okay, out of that, where did I screw up? Right? Because I'm not going to sit here and blame my business partner. I mean, she did a bunch of stuff she shouldn't have done, and she didn't do a bunch of stuff she should have. So there was a lot of both.
That's
You
the
know, just
story of all
unknown.
this time, right?
Well, you could call it incompetence, but I don't mean that in a rude way because we're all incompetent at something. It's ignorance, maybe. I don't know. And so, you know, but that's irrelevant. I took my eyes off it. I wasn't around it for about a year before it collapsed. And so I was being fed the numbers. The numbers looked all right. I did learn a very valuable lesson of the difference between, you know, the duality in business is profitability and cash flow. You know, you can be as profitable as you like, but if you don't have cash, you're sunk. You understand that.
Yep.
And so there was lots of things, but at the end of the day, when I look at this now, kind of, gosh, almost 15 years later, my math is terrible, but it's a long time ago. When I look at this now, It's like, these are lessons. I could not be talking to the people I'm talking to today. I could not be where I am today. I couldn't have done a trip to Lebanon like I did last week. I couldn't have gone into Africa years ago and worked with entrepreneurs and had an authority in a 28,000 person church as a business guy. Couldn't have done that without the journey I've been on. Working with multi-billion dollar companies, sitting alongside CEOs of $100 million companies as they weep over their situation. It's like, I've never run a $100 million company, but I could sit with it. And so I couldn't have done that without this journey.
That probably brings me to my next section. Um, so so my podcast, the title of the podcast is a sermon for one, where uh,
I
I
love that.
yeah. So because I've been a pastor for a long time, and a lot of the times I used to prepare sermons for for the audience or for the congregation.
Yeah.
And as I matured, I got to learn that I need to start preaching to myself first, right? And that has to be my first and most important audience. I have to be
Yes.
able to look at scripture and find out what that means for me if I am the audience. So a sermon for one, it was extremely cathartic, right? So you have that recording and do those things. And as I relaunch, one of the things that I'm asking my guests are, and you'll see a lot of people from the BNB call my first guest,
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's
but
good. At least I know they've got interesting stories.
yeah, right. It- but my question is there a passage, is there a story, it could be from the Bible or not from the Bible, that is currently your sermon for one right now? You just came back from Lebanon, so we know that that was a big secret during the time. So
Medium-sized secret, but yeah.
medium size, if more than three persons know that it's entire Indian Solutions knows everything about it.
I
But
can't go back now, but I did go. Yeah. That's not
but
true.
maybe it might be related to Lebanon or what you just went through. But is there this week or today, is there a passage in scripture, or is there a lesson, or is there something that is your sermon for one currently?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because as you were saying that, I mean, the first thing that came to mind has really been, there was the thematic scripture that stood out for me. I made the mistake of not doing it with my wife. We had a great time doing it. She, as you know, she's in Texas. And so we were doing a Bible study online on the Bible app.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided we'd do Proverbs.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, right. I mean, it's brilliant. But the difference with Proverbs is that there is so much wisdom. I mean, there's 15 points of wisdom in every single chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my fear going into that journey, was what am I going to take away from this? And it's funny you talk about the sermon of one. It's interesting because I and I'll come back to the scripture in a minute, but I think about when I think about leadership, my favorite line, and all of my clients know this, I say, so as a leader, whose fault is it? Right? And what do you think their answer is? I mean, when they're telling me the right answer, what do you think that answer is?
It's my fault.
It's my fault. I'm a
Mhm.
leader. Buck stops with me. And if I've got someone above me, it's their fault as well. Right. And so, but at the end of the day, I'm the leader. It's my fault. Now that doesn't mean that there isn't something else at play. That doesn't mean that something hasn't gone wrong. That doesn't mean, for example, my business partner did things in that business that were wrong. But at the end of the day, I can't do anything about that. All I can do is look at my situation. Now, I don't want to turn this into a, it's all about me situation, but it really came back to this idea. And so it's my fault. And so when if we think about, there's a lot of things that correlate back to one, right, back to me. My conflict workshop, which is called Conflict, What's Wrong with You? Right? Again, it's the leader's fault. Like, what's wrong with you, the leader, not what's wrong with the person you got
What's
a
wrong with
problem with.
you? Mhm.
So, and that comes from the speck in the log scripture, right? We're so busy trying to correct and fix and plan and do stuff for other people, right, to help them. And Jesus is just saying, you got, Can you see the log in your own eye? Right? I mean, you're busy trying to pull this tiny little thing that probably isn't even bothering them, and they can see quite well. But because of what you've got sticking out of you, like this big log sticking out of your own eye, you can't see, you can't tell. It says, and I love it because it doesn't just leave it at that. It says, first remove the log from your own eye, then you can see clearly to remove the speck from somebody else. And I've come across a lot of scripture like that. So that brings me back to your original question: what was kind of what's the latest thing in terms of the sermon? Because I think all of those are sermons for one, but
Yeah.
this one in particular is more relevant because it's the stuff that Jesus is doing in me right now. And so the conversation was, I got to the end of the book of Proverbs with my wife, and every day there was something to take away. And there was, again, another 15 things. And it could have ended up with all these rules that I needed to apply to be wise, right? And there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Mhm.
And I sat down at the end and I said, well, God, I can't remember half of this stuff. What am I going to do? This is too much, right? And he just took me back to, I can't remember the exact scripture, but it's basically, in a man's heart, he makes many plans, but the Lord orders his steps. So the one thing out of Proverbs is it doesn't matter how much I learn, how much I plan, how much I do. And in business, we're doers, planners, and learners, right? Good leaders. That's what we do. At the end of the day, I do all of that with an open hand because God's going to order my steps. That's the one thing. And so, it's almost like, I'm a planner. I love, and so I also know that being a planner means I take control and start to wander off, of course, because it's about my plans and not his. So that was really important. Practically speaking, there's a really, I remember being coached by a guy. He was actually the head of Focus on the Family in Australia, the CEO over there. And he just would say to me, just a practical, what does this look like? Right. Just a real simple, small, practical thing. We all go to networking meetings or connection meetings, right? And I do a lot of networking and connecting with other businesses, and I'll walk into a room with 50, 60, 70 people in there. I used to be, how many people can I get a business card out to? How many people can I talk to? And it was very much about me. And he challenged me and he said, he's a Christian. And he said, I used to do that. I just don't do it anymore. He said, I stand at the entrance to the room or the space, pulling into a parking lot, whatever. And I say, God, lead me to the one person that you need me to connect with today. Right. I've made the plan to be here. I've paid the dues. Whatever it is, everything's led me to be here. You order my steps. And so this is a real simple, practically speaking. There's plenty of other great, but that one just came to mind. And that really changed the way I network and connect. I'm not trying to network with everybody anymore. It's like there's that one person that God makes a connection with. And I would say 9 times out of 10 at an event, that happens. And so it's just I don't
It's
know,
just,
that's relevant, not, but yeah.
I think it's beautiful because the first part. So there's two parts. The thing that about accountability, right? Where you
Yep.
not only keep looking at other people, but you look at also this the trunk. Right? There's a trunk in front
Yeah.
of you,
Yes.
in your eye. Um, I noticed that as well. Like I knew that I have flaws, but when it matters the most, I don't see those flaws.
Yeah.
And one thing that I tell my upper management team, like Glenda and my sister, and one of the things that I ask them is, if you see I'm doing something wrong, tell me. You
Yeah.
know, be that voice, be that audible conscience voice, and tell me, hey, John. And they tell me all the time. I'm talking to Rochelle, for example, and hey, this thing that
Now the
you
truth
did,
comes out, Rochelle.
yeah, this thing that you did, this thing that, and then Glendon you say, whoa, John, they type on Discord, say, John, take a breather, take a
Yeah.
breather, bit hard on this issue, and then I say, okay, got it, and I tell Rochelle, don't be hurt because you could have been even more hurt because if somebody didn't warn me about it. But that's something that I had to do as well. I
Yeah.
can't keep looking at other people. I have to be because sometimes when it matters the most, all our training and practices just go out of the window if you don't have somebody that can help you be accountable to that. Um, so
It's
so
why we're supposed to be in community, right? I mean, yes, we're only responsible for our life at the end,
Mhm.
but we're supposed to do that in community, and that's why that's so important.
So how was Lebanon?
Lebanon was quick.
It's 5 days.
I mean, yeah, we flew in on a Thursday night, I think it was, and we flew out on a Monday morning. So it was quick, but yeah, an amazing time. I mean, just for me, as I said, like this is I could say like a calling. It is a calling for me to be amongst entrepreneurs all over the world and to equip them and to guide them. So, as you know, my sense of calling is to be a marketplace pastor, right?
Mhm.
I think the job of a pastor, I mean, the shepherding kind of role, is to love, equip, and release people to be whatever God's called them to be. Not what I think they should be, not what a community says, not what an institution says, what they're called to be. And so I just love being in a room with people, even when 90% of them don't speak a lick of English, and to see God work through them, to see them get revelation, and to be hungry for it. Obviously, we're coming in a fairly intense situation. I think if you live there, it'd be a different experience. But yeah, you come in with a heightened level of faith. You come in with a sense of, and of course, we were in Lebanon, which, you know, at the time we went there, was 4 days in after Israel had bombed Iran, and there was fighting going on backwards and forwards. And 2 days, 2 days in of our 4 days, Trump comes out saying, "Okay, we're not going to." Sorry, one day he says, "Yeah, we're going to take 2 weeks, assess the situation," and we now learn that was a smokescreen,
Mhm.
because the day later,
He
US went
bombed
in
it.
and bombed all the nuclear sites, and of course, then we're sitting in Lebanon, where I don't know. I mean, we're still probably 500 or 600 miles away, but still, certainly a lot closer than America,
Mhm.
and and with this sense of, well, what happens if the airport gets shut down, or what happens if they do attack, or if Hezbollah rises up in Lebanon, which they've been very quiet by the grace of God up until even now they're still very quiet. What happens if these things happen? And then we started to look at myself and thinking, oh, hang on, we've got these young, not young entrepreneurs, these new entrepreneurs that are from Syria and Lebanon, and they're living this all the time, and they're trying to grow a business,
Mhm.
with poor access to funding, with little help, and markets that are fluctuating so much because of the instability. It was just a really amazing time, to sort of, and to then share with them exactly what I shared before, like, because this was all about planning. We started off teaching them about kingdom business principles, faith and work, understanding business being your highest calling, all those sorts of things. We morphed that into discovering your purpose and outlining your purpose in your business. Then we went into marketing, finances, mainly market research, because it's a phased approach. And then we did a kind of almost like a wrap it all together, the beginnings of making a business plan, putting it all together, all sort of thing, and then a kind of time of worship, prayer, and commissioning. And so to go through that process, and in all of that, the message I just had we just had a table each. The message I had for my table is, these are all really good plans. There's a lot of good stuff in here. But at the end of the day, you carry this to God with an open hand and let Him order your steps. And so it was a really cool message like, you could see it deeply impacting them. And that was a lot of the feedback I got from my table. That's the thing I took away. So,
Yeah.
um, so it just was great to see it play out so quickly right there in Lebanon. So it was the last night watching a missile exchange between Iran and Israel was a little unnerving, in the sky above where we were staying. But
So
but
you
it,
had a
it
good view of what John said in Revelations, that the stars were falling from the sky. So were you able to see?
one of them
Oh,
fell from the sky. Yeah, the other ones, they and it really did. It just looked like shooting stars.
Mm,
really bright ones, but just shooting stars. I mean, the only thing that differentiated them, they had an orange flame coming out of the back,
mhm.
or an orange streak across the sky. But then there was one that just arced all the way, and it
All the
went
way.
behind the mountain. Yeah, so we were looking up on the Lebanon mountain, or Lebanon mountains. Yeah, and so obviously a little bit sheltered from the ultimate journey there, but you see it arc all the way over and down. And, I mean, you didn't hear anything or anything, but I assume it landed somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
There was
and
that one that landed. Oh,
I think quite a few have landed, but
yeah.
yeah. But anyway, watching that one in particular, and then kind of the usual thing I have when I go into a country and I do this. So one of the things about me is, in terms of my sense of calling as a missionary, is I don't have a calling to a specific country. I have a calling to business leaders, and so I get really deeply engrossed in the country, look for opportunities, see the hearts of the people, but I don't see them as different hearts for what God's doing to the guys I've worked with in Malawi or Kazakhstan or Southeast Asia, or I don't see. I mean, obviously culturally they're very different,
Mhm.
but it's just something that I guess God's put in my heart in that space to not. I almost say I'm country agnostic, right? I'm not called to a specific country or culture, at least yet. Um,
I, how does it feel to have that feeling, to have that revelation, or to have that already set understanding that this is the niche that God has given to me? Because I think
it
even as
feels good, man.
pastors,
Yeah.
even as pastors, right? I came into the Bible school because I thought I was a good preacher, and then year after year, I kept winning this award, best teacher of the year. I
Yeah.
said, I don't want to teach. I want to preach.
I want to
Because
preach. Yeah.
different things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah.
And because the teaching part is when you allow people to ask questions. The preaching, you just one way conversation, and it feels nice
Oh, I
sometimes.
see. That's a good differentiator. I've never heard that, but
And
yeah,
and
that's cool.
and the teacher is the one that you're teaching, and then you're open for questions either during your teaching or. And I was very good in asking people's questions, interacting, so I kept winning that. So, oh Lord. And then eventually I found out that, my niche is a little bit different. It kept getting narrower and narrower. How does it feel? Because you're very into that right now.
Hmm.
And I think you've settled into that. So how
Hmm.
does it feel to be able to, it's almost touch and feel God's calling and understanding
Yeah.
that this is where, because a lot of people go through their entire lives. I don't know if because they
I don't know
were
what God's will is for my
stubborn.
life. I don't know what my purpose is. I don't,
Yeah.
and then they got some inkling. And so the trick for me was don't drill down too far. Right. So honestly, you know, I had a sense of calling to be a marketplace pastor, to build a church in the marketplace. That's kind of the entirety of it. 25 years ago. So, like and then in all my, you know, Christian wisdom back then, I'd been a believer for about 8 or 9 years at that stage. Um, I then started trying to figure out, what does a church look like in the marketplace? So do I have like a Sunday church on a Tuesday at a lunchtime in a city? And again, nothing wrong with that if people are doing that.
Mhm.
But it was like, but one of the things that it was really interesting in my very early journey, I came back to the Lord when I was 20, and that's when I really engaged with him and felt him leading, and through other people and through wisdom and through the Bible speaking to me. And one of the things that I really sensed was that he said, I'm calling you to build my church, but don't rush, because it doesn't look like the church does today. I mean, that was
Mhm.
1991. So, just in case someone's watching this 100 years from now, it's 2025. And that's all right. We've got timestamps on everything now. But and so but it was fascinating because I just kept walking through that. And then, the frame I had was the Sunday church, which I love. I'd still love today. I was a worship leader. I was a youth leader. I thought maybe it's one of those. And then just good people that I was around started to call me into marketplace through, it was spirit inspired. They weren't. specifically doing. They could see something I couldn't see.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I went into business for myself, I could clearly see it was the marketplace, and it was funny that the kind of the statement was that I still got very clear today was, be there for people who run business, not just the business itself. So
Mm-hmm.
everything I've structured over that was 2001. So what is it? Yeah, 2025. So 24 years. So everything I've structured since then has been, does this help people in business, not just the structure or the operation of their business? And so that clarity, the trap can be with clarity like that when you're immature or ill-formed, is you get stuck in that one spot and no, I'm not going there, right? But there's also a maturity in the very same word, and being able to say no, and be able to say no, that's not where I'm supposed to be. And so that's caused me a lot. I'm not supposed to be actively serving inside the Sunday model,
Mm-hmm.
at least at this point. That's what it feels like. So that's caused a lot of disconnect with me in the local church over the years. I was fortunate in the early formation of that, the first 10, 11 years, to just have this amazing pastor who's just like, he actually, he actually walked in and fired me from youth ministry. And he's a funny guy. Like, he's a funny guy. I loved him. I still do love him to death. And, he laughed. He goes, "No, Jono, it's not because you suck at it or whatever. You're not good at it." He says, "No, you're great at it." He says, "You're just not supposed to be there."
Uh-huh.
I mean, that takes guts for a pastor, a Sunday church pastor, to do that. And that was kind of foresight. So I had that for 10 or 11 years. And he would invest in me and a couple of other guys who were also getting this sense of building church where you are, as we ended up calling it. And so, yeah, so it just started to make it, and it was interesting in terms of my purpose and that sort of thing. There was no perfect business. There was no perfect. I mean, I was a
Mm-hmm.
marketer, so I went into marketing, right? But I've dabbled in other businesses. There was no like, I have to be in this business and this business alone. It's more as he put things in front of me, I stepped into them just to see what he was doing in there, whether he wanted me there. But I mean, it was all business related, I guess. That's
Mm-hmm.
probably one of the parameters. And so yeah, so it's really allowed me to almost keep this broad approach with God. I've still no idea what a church in the marketplace looks like in its entirety. And quite frankly, I've come to a place now where I don't think I ever will, because, we're not supposed to know.
Yeah,
So, um,
it's a human endeavor, and I think it's futile a lot of times where we always want to try to define things, define ministry, define God at certain
oh yeah,
time.
yeah. And,
And
and I live in America, man. It's like there's the 6 habits and the 5 packages and the 3 things you need to do and 5 ways you can hear God's voice better. It's like, yeah,
it's
yeah.
yeah,
We love that stuff.
yeah, I heard this sermon. I forgot the name of the pastor. I forgot who it is, but he tells that we don't live under the law anymore. We're under grace,
Yeah,
but it's our nature to always want to be under the law for some reason. We want to have like 5 steps where this is the church, and that's where denominationalism comes from. And then this is why all the hatred towards religion is, because religion is it's this structured thing that
yeah,
doesn't allow you to feel anymore because you have to touch and see, and that goes against what faith is. You talk
yeah,
about hope with market hope, but faith is believing in things that are unseen.
yeah,
And we start going outside of faith and going to the flesh as we start wanting to be able to see, touch, and feel things instead of trusting, having
yeah,
hope, and having faith.
yeah, yeah.
And
That's
because
a
one
great
of the
that's a
things that
great way of looking at it.
yeah,
Yeah,
I keep asking people, what is business's mission for you, right? What does it mean to be a pastor in the marketplace? What it means to have a church in the market, and I keep seeing different answers from different people, different perspectives, and I've learned to say, that's okay.
yeah,
It's okay for. people to have like different visions as to what the ministry is, different visions as to what it means to be in ministry, different visions and understanding as to what it means to be in missions in the marketplace. We don't have to
100%.
structure it. We don't have to.
Well, and so the way I see it is that religion and everything it has to bring a dichotomous relationship, right? So it's you're in or you're out, you're saved or you're unsaved, you're this or you're that, you're an Anglican or you're a Catholic, all these sorts of things. And as I started to unpack this stuff, there's some really interesting stuff that you just brought up there. One of the things I felt was really clear was that the kingdom of God is not an either or location; it's an as well,
Mhm.
right? And so and I'm not talking about compromise here. I'm not talking about, there's a biblical guideline, right? We've got the Bible as our guide. We've got other
Mhm.
believers that keep us on track. We're not talking about a cult here. But at the end of the day, there was just I started to learn so many things about the kingdom of God as I opened up this journey. But the first one was it's not an either or, it's an as well. So just because I think there's a way that God's called me to build the church in the marketplace, I'm hoping there's 30, 40, 50 million other people out there that have a sense of calling to build church in the marketplace. And there are, and there's not about 30, 40 million, but there's lots of other people, from an individual business owner using that as their space to preach the gospel, to build community, to invest in families, to, faith-driven communities that are doing it, and the BAM movement, as you mentioned. And so, and places like that, there's a lot of faith-driven communities. There's a lot of kingdom business communities. A lot of, in fact, the thing I'm seeing at the moment particularly in the Christian leadership space is a real drive to encouraging men in their faith and to step out in their faith. I'm seeing a lot of that, which I think is really good. So it's that whole and the way this is interesting because the way God showed this to me originally was He actually gave me a picture, and it was I think I've shared this with you, but I still today, like, I've never had it drawn. I've never drawn it. Maybe I should go onto AI and see what it might create for me. But it was called the Market Hope Mosaic. In fact, by the time I'm finished, you'll probably have done it for me, Jonathan. So, um,
Pretty
it was
for
called the
me.
market. It was called the market. Yeah. No, don't make it a meme, please. It's very serious. It was called the Market Hope Mosaic. That's what I understood it as. And it was one of those things like in those old ads where they would have one image and then they'd pan back and then 5 images and then 10 and then
Mhm.
50 and then hundreds. And it would make a broader picture out of all those images, a mosaic, basically. And so what it was, and without it sounding like a religious exercise, it was a Byzantine kind of picture of the face of Jesus. That's what I understood back then. But it was when you zoom right in, there was like the Market Hope logo sitting there, just randomly sitting there, not even in the middle, just there. And then all these different business ideas and economic activities and road projects and oil refineries and banks. And it just kept going. And then it suddenly zoomed out and it was millions and millions of entities that made the face of Jesus. And so that's what I saw. And it was like what he was also showing me there was there's people sitting out here on Jesus' ear, right? That one of their businesses or the project they're leading or whatever it is, and they have no idea who Market Hope is. I don't need them to know. I don't want to be at the middle of this. This is why the Market Hope logo wasn't at the center, by the way. It
Mhm.
was the first image I saw, but it wasn't at the center.
Mhm.
And so the idea being that, this is just something that the Spirit is doing, that is representing Jesus to the world. And again, it's not just the marketplace. It's not just businesses. It's all sorts of different expressions. But the other key piece from that, and this is before I actually heard Billy Graham's kind of prophecy on this, but the other key piece of it wasn't the church, the institution.
Yeah, yeah.
And
There's the
so, yeah,
there's the story in the Old Testament about the silversmith, and the question is how do you know that when do you know that the silver is ready and you put it on fire and the answer of the silversmith is I know it's ready when I can see my reflection. in the
Oh,
soul. And 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 that what you said, resonated with me, and I remember that because we keep on trying to refine ourselves 2 hours per week at church, yet we spend 40 to 50 hours at work. Uh, it's
some
one
of
thing.
us 60, right, Jonathan?
Yeah. Some of us have never
At
logged out.
least.
Not log out. We log out when we're sick.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
can you imagine how long it would take for you to refine and to eventually have Jesus reflected in you if you're working at such a disadvantage where you're not reflecting Christ in your life at work and just trying to reflect Christ just a few hours per week.
Mm.
And that was something that I had to do as well.
Yeah.
I had to eventually from being a full-time pastor to working corporate. And I looked at it and said, in my dealings, in the ways that I exercise mercy, in the ways that I exercise grace, in the way that I exercise wanting to bring people up and to show that, that people can feel that they are loved and cared for, in the corporate work, because it's a cutthroat place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Betrayals left and right. There's people. It, in my company, inside my company, I want people to feel that they feel and understand and prove by our actions that there is no ill intent here. There is no intent here to use and abuse you in terms of in your time and not pay you appropriately, or that is sort of, I want my business and myself to be Christ-like also in our dailies. And
Yeah.
that includes turning over tables if you see something wrong, right?
Right.
That
Right.
includes that.
Yeah.
But uh, everything in the spirit of restoration, I think.
Yeah.
Whenever
Yeah.
there's discipline.
You're tapping into my pet definition of assertiveness, right?
Mm,
So I say we're aiming for assertiveness, right? So true assertiveness is somebody who is able to 100% back themselves. Now, as Christians, we don't back ourselves. We back ourselves through, you know, through
mhm,
being the righteousness of Christ, being a new creation, all those sorts of things, and working our way into that space. But the other piece of it is you always do it out of humility. So, I say in simple terms, if you know you're right and being right isn't going to help, it's okay to not be right,
mhm,
right? But I mean, there's other ways that plays out, but there's a lot in that. I think there's a whole bunch of other stuff. This is part of the either or kind of stuff, right? So
mhm,
we sort of say, well, I can't wait to be in church, or I can't wait to worship on Sunday, or at home group on Tuesday night, or when someone's got a guitar and some music and we can finally worship God, right?
mhm,
Well, you and I know that work was a pre-fall idea. We were designed to work. Now, it wasn't meant to be and so when the fall happened, work was never cursed.
mhm,
The work we worked on was, the
mhm.
ground in that case,
The ground,
but
yeah.
work was never cursed. Work was always designed to be a way for us to worship God. And so it's why I believe today, this is see, when I talk about finding people's purposes in Jesus, sometimes these people don't even know him, but I
Mhm,
find it for them anyway. And because God has a purpose for everybody, it's just they got to activate that relationship with him, right? And so, when I see this idea of work being worship, it makes sense. You sort of say, well, it's you talked a lot about the behavioral stuff in terms of how we behave, and is it in a Christian way, which is, I think, that's a difficult way to look at it because none of us are perfect.
mhm,
Um, but the other piece of that, if we think about, okay, this is my act of worship. These are the things I'm called to do. This is my place where I'm called to be, and so it makes sense that work instills so much purpose in us.
mhm,
You look at it. I mean, I've studied this from the point of view of people who have retired at the other end of their working career, and just, I'm just going to be fishing. I'm going to buy a place on the beach. I'm just going to, basically, they're just going to goof off for the rest of their lives. and man in particular, but humankind is designed by God to be purposeful. We're designed with good works in mind. And so when we work, there's a purpose in work. And so I kind of look at business and the marketplace and that. And so when I talk to a business owner or leader, I'm saying, who is a believer, I'm like, you are activating a place where people are able to not maybe discover their purpose, but fulfill it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, and again, it's why I always say, if you retire or leave work particularly after a long period of time and you have no purpose, I can almost guarantee you'll be divorced, diseased, or dead within about 18 months to 2 years. Because I've seen it happen. And it
Yeah.
turns out now there's research on this,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
I've
Because we are designed to have purpose and work being worship. And so, like you've heard us talk about this before. We start talking about things like retirement, which is unbiblical.
Mhm.
And well, it's not unbiblical, it's non-biblical. It's just not
Mhm.
mentioned. But
It's funny you mentioned about during the beginning at the garden, because the first act that God made in the creation of the universe was to work for 6 days, and then he rested, and then he
Yep.
established that as an example for everybody that you're gonna work,
Yeah.
and he gave tasks to Adam and Eve, and he gave them work, and that was their act of worship. And the act of
Yes.
worship they had
Yeah.
was not something spiritual. Your act of
Yeah.
worship is to have devotion, to pray. And no, you're gonna tend the garden. So you're
Yeah.
you're gardeners for God.
Yep.
And 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 God basically said, I work for 6 days, 7 days, I rested. You're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna work, and then you're gonna rest, and then
Yeah.
work, and then gonna rest. But it's interesting. It's interesting and I think that a lot of the problem that we have, and where the dichotomy comes from, is because uh we kind of try to find an excuse to put our Christian responsibilities and who we are as Christians aside, so that we
Or
can,
to paid professionals.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, well, yeah, we oh, it's okay that I'm cheating on my finances. It's okay that I am not being as wise or as patient, because this is work.
Mm.
This is not ministry.
Yeah.
This
It's
is
okay not to. Yeah.
so there's that escapism that people have, and I can be less of a Christian here, because who expects me to be a Christian?
We used to in Australia, we used to call them submarine Christians. They just surface on the front.
As they
Yeah.
start clocking in,
All over there in their crowd of people. What was that?
as they clock into work, they just go there you go.
Yep, that's it. Yep. Dive.
Goodbye. See you on Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah, stubborn
But
Christians.
it's so true. And I think, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for this. There's a lot of pressures and so forth, fear of man. There's so many different things. We could spend hours unpacking what is it that leads us down this path. Some of it comes from what we would say is the Christian or religious side, right? It's control or manipulation, and those sorts of things can be equally as evil as
Yeah.
some of the other stuff. But at the end of the day, um, I've been on a fairly extensive journey of understanding what grace is, what it looks like to be the righteousness of Christ, who, still screws up, but that's, so what I'm doing is, rather than trying to be a better Christian or better behaved or start doing more of the right things and less of the wrong things, which is kind of what we're taught to do, is, okay, I am the righteousness of Christ. I am a new creation. So my role in life is to grow into that, right? Not to try and run away from the former.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I learned this as a leadership and life coach. I trained as a life coach. Don't tell anyone. And I learned this as a coach. We used to call it self-permission versus self-discipline. I still do a lot of coaching on this. I got to do these things. I've got to be this. I have to do. I can't, and all this sort of thing. And what they're not saying is, this is who I am, is my identity. And so therefore everything I do in life should make sense according to my identity. Right. And
Mhm.
it's beautiful as I started to unpack this more recently in the Bible and saying, oh, this is actually the way God designed us to be. We're designed to be the righteousness of Christ. And the reality is, yep, we're still kind of moving towards that, rather than the sinner. I'm still a sinner saved by grace. I was definitely a sinner saved by grace. I still sin, but now I'm moving towards my true identity rather than running away from my old, or
Yeah.
moving away from my old.
Yeah.
And it's just a foundation that I've found very powerful in a lot
Yeah.
of different things.
Yeah. Going back to the silversmith, being able to be reflection of Christ in our lives. There's this song. I'm not a musician, so I don't remember titles, but there's this song that in part of the chorus he says that I met Jesus Christ in the parking lot.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So it's like, you
Wrong,
know,
but yeah,
I met Christ in the parking lot. It's like because the person that he met was really uh had that identity,
yeah,
and was silver that was ready. So it
yeah,
wasn't the pastor that was in the pulpit. He did not meet Christ in the pulpit. He didn't meet Christ, in the, you want to see Christ in the pulpit, right? But in the story is that he met Christ in the parking lot. It was
yeah.
the parking lot that he
It's
felt like.
those earthy connections face to face. And this is what I see with the church in the marketplace. And this is why right now, like, I like having these opportunities like I just had in Lebanon, to be able to just go in and just practice building businesses in that part of the world, or in any part of the world that otherwise would struggle to do it. Is that the hope that these people would do this together, build community, build economic value in their local economy, whilst also bringing the truth of Christ, bringing that spiritual journey alongside it. And this is the church that creates jobs. This is a church that adds economic value to an economy. The real revelation for me came from the small business minister back in Australia when I was a lobbyist. And he said, Jonathan, he said, we know that small businesses are the powerhouse of our economy. We got to figure out that they're so hard to reach. How do we reach them all? Right? How do we make something useful for them? And we worked hard together over my time as CEO of that organization and as a lobbyist to work through that. And we came up with some really cool stuff. We worked with unions, we worked with all sorts of people. And so so it's like that was like early days of, like, there's this business imperative that's quite different to anything else, nonprofit, government, large business, that is organic. It makes sense to the local community. It looks more like the church, because when we look at the New Testament church, it was all about the region or the city that they were operating in. It
Mhm.
wasn't these mega churches with campuses all over the place, and not so disagree with that. I love the resourcing of that, but you know what I mean? Like, it was like, we are here inside this community.
Mhm.
And by the way, we're a church that's actually growing this community. We're providing jobs. We're putting food on the table, roof over people's heads. And by the way, we're laying a platform for us to actually bring the gospel with that as well.
Yeah, and that's amazing, and that's something that I also want to be part of. Uh,
Well, you are.
in, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, you are. You don't want to be, you are, man.
and that's great. I also have opportunities to do some regular pastor work sometimes in my own company where
Yep.
uh you call you have a coaching call, and it just turns out you're just talking about trying to comfort people, trying to help people understand them.
Love,
And
equip, and release, man. Love,
yeah,
equip, and release.
and it's something that yeah, through the years I've seen opportunities where if we base it on our HR training in corporate, this person is a liability, we need to get rid of them right away. They made this mistake, they need to be fired. They did this, they need to, and this is how you do it. You try, they
Right.
help you navigate through. Let's and on my
It's all
business,
about mitigating. It's all about mitigating risk,
mitigate
not actually helping
risks.
people.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I've learned to see potential in people
Mm,
and say, yeah, I'm going to invest in this person. And I know that they're going to mess up a lot.
yeah, yeah,
Right? I know there was, but I see, I sort of see their hearts and their desire to, to grow, desire to be somebody, to desire to achieve something. So I'll be there for them, and, obviously I fired people through the years, but,
oh,
uh,
that can be as healthy for you as it is for
as,
them, by the way.
yeah,
Yeah,
correct. And, but again, if I'm going to fire somebody, if I'm going to forgive somebody, if I'm going to train or going to coach somebody, I want them to, it's my desire that even if they recognize it or not, I want them to see Christ, because I have a lot of people that work for me that are not Christians, right? Uh, and I want them to, if they're Christians, to say, oh, yeah, that was very Christ-like. If they're not Christians, I want them to feel that was different,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
That
And
it's good.
it often it becomes evident. It's really interesting because it actually becomes really evident in the screw ups,
Mm,
right? When you just whatever, it's just a bad day, you lose the plot, right? And then you have to come back and say, I'm so sorry, that was just way out of character for me. You don't have to put a religious spin on it,
yep.
but you know that Jesus wants to restore, and so that should be in your heart as well. And you go back and it's funny. It's the same in parenting, by the way, right? It's not your capacity to be perfect parents and always be lovey-dovey and the Instagram family.
Yep.
Everyone's smiling, everyone's happy, and then as soon as the camera turns off, oh, I'm out of here. It's like it's that ability to work through things, and kids seeing parents do that. That's their highest level of security,
Yeah.
not mum and dad being always in agreement and
Mhm.
always being whatever this weird thing of love is called. It's like, and so, yeah, no, 100%. And,
Mm,
and so, sometimes it's like, I forgive you and you're fired.
yeah.
I
Some
mean, again, but it's just, there's lots of dichotomies in there in that sense.
uh, when I first became a manager, the first person that I ever fired is one of my closest friends right now,
Yeah, that's tough.
and this is like 15 years ago. So yeah, and she always calls me TL, team lead. Hey TL, how you doing? When I'm down
Yeah.
and I can't control myself and I just post something depressing on Facebook, she's one of the first persons to say, "Hey TL, are you okay? Talk to me. What's happening?" And sometimes I tell her, and if she's listening, she knows who she is, and I'll tell her, I fired you, right? I fired. And it's weird. We're very good friends, I fired you. But and I tried to bring her to my business, but she's not that employee that I can use in my business. But we're very good friends,
I
and
need to
she
know, right? And that's why a company needs to have purpose. It needs to know what
yeah
it's doing. And so this, as we work through in the Forge Leader, when we talk about the trail markers, purpose and strategy come before people,
yeah
right?
mhm,
Because you got to know why you exist and what the boundaries are of your existence to then say, here's the strategy to help us get after that. And now we know what kind of people that are going to be the right people to bring in to build that strategy, which makes it easier to communicate and makes it easier to build processes.
and
And
just to bring us back to one of the first things that you said is that purpose and strategy have to come first because you have to create that mold where people are
yeah,
going to feel in that. And I think that one of the first things that I was taught in evangelism was that our prayers is not necessary to make us ready, prepare us, and etc. But have that prayer and ask God to prepare the field, the hearts that we are going to reach.
yeah,
So the
yeah,
same the
yeah.
same way that
Ask the
you
Lord of the harvest.
yeah
Yeah,
the same way that you're thinking, I'm not going to network, I'm not going to talk to 100 people and give out 100 cards. There is going to be people prepared for me to talk to, and
yeah,
those are the ones that I have to pay. And I remember when I was evangelizing, at the beginning I did not understand that. And so once we went to the field, we went to the malls, parks, and etc., and we could not find somebody. And I was very skeptic in terms of praying for the field, and very magical or things like, because I was very inexperienced, right? And we met these two ladies, a mother and a daughter, and they were sitting alone. I said, okay, target locked. I'm going to evangelize those two. We went there, talked to them, and with my trainer, we talked, and they were just not responding. I was funny. I was happy, and they was just not responding. And then I went through the entire spiel. No, and I asked them, would you like to pray? And they said, sure. And as I was leading them in prayer, I was ready to, even before I said amen, I was ready to go ahead. Right? I still have time to look for somebody because we had like a quota of people that we should share. As our
You had a
heads were,
quota?
yeah, we had a quota of people that we had to
Oh
share the
my
gospel
gosh.
because it was evangelism training for
That's like
evangelism.
having parking ticket quotas and stuff
Yeah,
like that. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
wow.
So we had to have somebody because every afternoon we go back to our training facility and sort of share. I can't come back empty-handed, right? So
So
I was
how many people made stuff up?
yeah, I know, I don't know.
I mean,
But
that's what it does, right?
no, they
So,
had trainers with them, so
oh, okay, so you couldn't.
so as our heads were lifting from the prayer, I was ready to go because I said, "There's no way." There were tears in their eyes,
Mm,
and I was looking. I said, in my heart, I was saying, "What happened? Well, what happened?" Because I don't understand this now, right? Because I didn't sense anything. They were not smiling. They were not interacting with the jokes. Because we have like illustrations to make sure that people understand the concept. And I was just dumbfounded. But my trainer on my side was just smiling. He said, lesson, incoming lesson, right? Like me, I was like, I'm just gonna be right now.
really?
And they noticed that I was quiet. And she said, the mother said, you know, um, our her son had run away from home. Not a child, just ran away, like a like early 20s, ran away from home and had
Right.
some mental difficulties, and they've been looking for for their son and brother, and they could not find him, and they had their last bit of money before they had to go home, and they just went to the mall, and the mall was closing, and that's how we found them because they were like alone sitting, and we just didn't know what to do and if there was any good that could come out of the day. And then she told us, and then both of you arrive like angels from heaven. And I was just like, oh my God, what's happening now? It was like, I should have taken that prayer seriously. And because
That's all right. God did.
I was not prepared because, God was not necessarily preparing me, He was preparing them for me.
Yes.
And,
That's a
that's the same,
great illustration of that. I love that.
yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah.
Whenever somebody tells a story
So
about
much,
God,
it's
I always
so
think,
much about like, well, I mean, even when we sort of think, I just want to know Jesus, and that's all well and good. I want to know Jesus. I want to be in relationship with Him, and Jesus' qualifier is, I want to know you.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, this doesn't work unless you let me in first, and that's not just at that point of salvation. That's every single day. Says, when he starts talking about like in the sheep and goats, he says, "Away from me, I never knew you."
Mhm.
Not you never knew me or you didn't do enough for me or whatever. It's like, I just didn't know you.
It's
And
funny because Revelations 3:20, the one about letting Christ in, and we normally use that for salvation.
yeah,
That was addressed to a church.
yeah,
Addressed to a church. Yeah, there was this illustration because pastors and illustrations, right? Uh, there was
yeah.
this homeless guy that tried to go to church, and they didn't let him come because of his clothes. So he sat at the curb, and the person that he was sitting next beside him said, "Don't worry, I've been trying to get into that church for years," and it was Jesus.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I don't think Jesus would have the same level of patience with that one, but you never know.
But
So,
yeah,
oh, that's
it was
funny.
a good conversation. I think,
Yeah.
thanks for that. I always we had so many deep conversations that we forgot to turn the recording on. So
Yeah. Yeah. They've missed the best one. So they want to come back and hang out with
yeah,
us some more.
yeah,
So,
the words that need heavy editing because we talk
yeah.
about recipes of things that should not have recipes for. But
Fair enough.
but 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 thank you, Jonathan. So I'll do you have anything that you would, because this actually is going to become a podcast episode. So do you have anything you'd like to plug in, or where they can reach you?
Oh yeah, look, I mean, I've enjoyed this conversation. Thanks, Jonathan. It's we always have a lot to talk about, and I'm sure this won't be the last one, or and it definitely isn't the first one, which is the first one we've recorded. um, but look, as I said, I've got a real heart and passion for people in business and building economic communities all over the world, and so you can find, my business, theforgedleader.com, FORGED, theforgedleader.com. I guess, you heard that my company is called Market Hope. I, at the time of recording this, I don't actually have any nonprofit established, but I am looking to do that. The site is markethope.co. And that's where I want to continue having these conversations with, I call them economic communities. It sounds a little cold and harsh, but really small to medium businesses. I'm looking for businesses that are, obviously starting out and scaling, but they want to employ people, because I think that's where we really make a big impact. They want to come alongside other businesses and be a community, either in their local space or at least online, in terms of a discipleship and encouragement. And so, through mentoring. So that's kind of where I sit, I guess. I don't know what else to really tell you, Jonathan. It's I just love these opportunities, and I'm almost happy to walk away and no one know who I am.
Awesome.
Because if it blesses someone, that's cool. But I love the opportunity to speak, to train. I must be a teacher after all. I didn't think I was, because I don't. I enjoy these, like, just being able to talk about stuff. But
Mhm.
when I'm with a group of people, I love to sit down and ask questions and get feedback and grow things and watch them get aha moments. So maybe I'm more of a teacher than I thought I was. So
It's that realization, right? Awesome.
yeah,
So again, thank you, and we'll add all the links in the description for.
awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.